Good day, folks. Welcome back to Tenta Outdoors. My name is Alan from Season 10 of Alone. Today's video, Alone, Season 11, Episode 11. Let's get started. This episode starts out with Timber and it's day 65. They show him having an encounter with an old gray-faced marten up in a tree, kind of growling at him, and Timber has a few words with this marten. And it's interesting how each of the remaining contestants is having their own experience with a marten hanging around their site. We got Timber with this gray-faced old marten trying to get at his stuff. We've got obviously William with Sassy, the adventures of Sassy. I mean, Sassy's really giving William a run for his money with his food stores. And then this episode, Dub is having an experience with a marten stealing his fish off the top of his shelter. And most contestants, in northern Canada anyways, do have experiences with marten. I had to release that one from a snare on season 10, which was a pretty exciting moment. But a marten never got my food, but trust me, they tried. Timber heads down to the river to check his set lines. Unfortunately, they're empty. And he talks about how he's starting to feel weary. Timber's talking about how he has pain in one of his toes, and he's worried that it might be frostbite. We all know what happened a few seasons back in the 100-day challenge when a contestant got removed because of frostbite in one of her toes. So it's a real concern out there, and he's nervous that if he has frostbite, he could be taken out of the game. He goes back to the shelter, he inspects it, and he realizes that it's probably not serious and it's more a frost nip than frostbite. Timber's next scene, he's kind of looking across the expanse of his site, and he's howling like a wolf. And they show him pondering. And this stage in the game, when it's late and you got a lot of time, most of your work is done, your shelter's made, hopefully you have some food stored. You got a lot of time on your hands, and you do a lot of thinking. And he was pondering who was left in the game. He threw a couple names out. I think he said he feels that Jake probably got big game. And I think he spoke something about William as well. And I remember doing the exact same thing, like wondering who was left. I was constantly kind of talking to myself on and off camera, like who's left? I was thinking back to my time in orientation camp and what skills did people have? Like I remember thinking Cade, because he was such a good shot with his bow, and his career is a big game hunting guide. And so I was thinking, geez, Cade probably got big game. If anybody's going to get big game, it's going to be Cade. And I remember thinking a lot about Wyatt too. It's like, I remember thinking, if I can catch fish out here and sustain myself on fish, Wyatt will be able to sustain himself on fish as well. And yeah, and I was running through all the contestants' skills and skill sets in my mind and just wondering who was left, man. And then you hear the boats in the distance, and you might hear the helicopter. Are they getting B-roll footage? Are they picking somebody up? Is there a med check? So all these things going on around you are playing with your mind at this stage in the game. It's very interesting for me to watch, actually. It brought back a lot of emotions and feelings that I had late in that game, wondering what's going on in the game. Timber's cutting some firewood, but he doesn't want to do too much. This is kind of an interesting point for me, because when you don't have much to do and you're spending so much time in your shelter, you want to save some work for the next day, just for your mental well-being. Like, you got to have a sense of purpose out there, or your brain goes dark and you start thinking about getting the heck out of there. On that point, they show Timber in his shelter, and he's thinking about his next art project. He's got some birch bark left, and as he's thinking about that art project, he's laying down just thinking. And I remember laying down in my shelter and just thinking, and it's amazing how fast the time can go by. Like you lay down and close your eyes and just kind of think about your family, you think about home, what you're going to do tomorrow, how many people are left in the game. And all of a sudden 3 hours is gone. And as he was laying there, his boot was close to the fire, and he ended up melting the end of his boot. Interestingly enough, I did the same thing, but I was sitting beside the fire and I looked down, and the end of my boot was so soft I could like stuck my finger through it. But obviously I moved it away and it was all good. And when Timber looked at it closely, he realized that his boot was still okay. It hadn't gone through. But something like that, like having a big hole in the end of your winter boot with nothing to repair it with, could take you out of the game if your feet got wet, or if it didn't take you out of the game, it could make your remaining time there very unpleasant. They then show Timber heading down to the river to check his set lines. And Something that I did out there that I'm not sure if people did it or not, but it worked really well. To keep your hole open on the ice. I learned this before I went out from a book. I'd never done it before the show, but I definitely read about it. So to keep your hole open, get some spruce boughs, cover the hole with spruce boughs, and then pile it with snow on top. And it'll never freeze over. Well, not never, but it really slows down the freezing process. And they were doing something like that, but I think Timber was using like sticks, but I wasn't sure if he was covering it or not. Because this episode, they did show a lot of the contestants having to re-chop the hole through their ice every time they went down their ice fishing. And part of me was wondering why they didn't employ that strategy of covering it with spruce boughs and then putting snow on top of it to keep the hole from freezing, and you wouldn't have to chop through it every time you went down there. When Timber checks his set lines, he does find a small pike on the end of his line. He's pretty excited, and he decides to eat it right away because, man, he is sick of eating that tough moose jerky that's hard on his teeth and his gums. So he decides to make a soup and eat it right away. And then he starts talking about food fantasies and dreaming about food all the time. And he's even having dreams that he's stealing food. Like, I could really relate to that. I know it was spoken about this before, but from day 50 onwards for me, I was having these intense food fantasies. Like, again, I dreamt about them. I remember one dream I had, I was in New York. I don't know why, but I was in New York, and I was at this like high-end Italian deli meat shop, and I went in there and I ordered this freshly baked sub with a white bread, and I remember the dream specifically. It was like a bunch of fried eggs on it. I don't even know if there's a sub with fried eggs on it, but it had a whole bunch of fried eggs, a layer of ham, a layer of bacon, and then melted cheese on top. And just as I was going to eat that, I woke up, and I remember that moment clearly. So yeah, the food fantasies are tough. So as viewers know, at this stage in the game, you're in your shelter a lot. And they showed Timber passing the time making a little board game, and he called that board game Trial by Fire. And it kind of reminded me of Survivor. And if you get voted out, or if the dice rolls too many times and hits your number, you're eliminated from the game. You get thrown in the fire. Timber heads down to the river and sets his gill net under the ice. He did it using a technique by doing 2 holes, the length of your gill net or a little longer, and threading a piece of string underneath so you can pull your gill net under the ice and set it and check it without having to cut through the ice as often. And he didn't seem overly happy with his gill net set. He didn't think it would work, and they never really went back to his gill net, so it probably didn't work, or it probably would have made the edit. Again, Timber talks about how his feet are like numb, especially one of his feet, and he's having a hard time sleeping, and he's really concerned that his body's circulation isn't working properly and not supplying blood to his feet like it should. And he's concerned about that, and it's really impacting his sleeping, and he can really feel that his body is slowly breaking down. Up next on the episode is William, and it's day 66. And they show William again employing his long stick grouse snare technique, and he catches another grouse way up in a tree. Again, every time he does that, I'm just like blown away. Super impressed by that technique, and I think William will change the game of Alone forever. Now that everybody knows how to do that, I'm sure that we'll see that again in upcoming seasons. He processes the grouse, and he throws some of the intestines to one of the gray jays hanging around his camp, because he feels bad for them. He wants to feed them. I really respected that, actually. And then he eats some of the grouse's organs raw right there on the spot. William's next scene is heading down to the river to check his gill net. And for the first time, we hear William talking about his family. If he had talked about his family, it hadn't been a lot. And he's feeling sad because it's his boy's 12th birthday, and he's feeling sad that he's not there to share it with him. And he kind of dedicates that day to his son. He has a fire in his honor and just kind of sits around, has some soup, and is just honoring his son at that moment. And that happened to me often out there too. I used to call those sad attacks. Like, I think that made the edit too. I remember one time I was checking my snare line, and I started thinking about my son and my daughter, and it had been so long since I'd seen them, and just wondering how they were doing. And I just kind of embraced these sad attacks that I'd have. I used to have them about my wife, my mom, and like I said, my kids, but I realized that if you just kind of embrace them, let it happen, I don't know, cry for a second or just get sad. And sometimes I didn't do it on camera, sometimes I did. I learned that they were over soon. They didn't last for long. They might last 5 or 10 minutes, and then the sad attack was over, and I'd carry on with my day. And I think William did a really good job doing that as well. He makes it to his lines, and he catches a nice sized pike and an in-canoe through the ice. William is looking really strong. He's got a reasonable amount of food. His food procurement has been kind of slow and steady and just really consistent. And when he gets low on food, he seems to somehow catch more to keep him in the game. And yeah, his positive attitude and his mindset is just rock solid. And at this stage, there is definitely no quit in William. So William has like a day use area away from his shelter where he spends a lot of time in front of the fire, just cooking, passing the time, staying warm. And he decides to build a lean-to right in front of the fire. It's something I wish I had done. I thought about it many times, but I never actually got around to it. So you can sit underneath the lean-to in front of the fire, even if it's snowing, and the lean-to will trap some of that heat from the fire and make him far more comfortable. He talks about how he doesn't want to have many fires in his shelter because he's concerned about a shelter fire. And each time he has a fire inside his shelter, it dries it out just a little bit more each time, increasing the risk of a spark catching it on fire. And as we know from other seasons, a shelter fire is usually the end of your time out there on the show. Dub is up next. It's day 67, and he's looking at himself in the camera, and he doesn't like the look of his face. He's noticing all the wrinkles. And funnily enough, is that a word, funnily? I don't think it is. Anyways, interestingly enough, I had almost the exact same scene later on in the day. I was kind of looking at myself in the camera, and I had these big lines here underneath my cheekbones. I'd lost so much weight in my face. I had these deep crevices underneath my cheekbones that I had never seen before. And man, it's kind of unnerving. I'd never grown out my beard that long before, and I didn't like how gray it was, especially here. So I had a gray beard and these big wrinkles, and I looked like an old man. I didn't like it. So it was kind of disturbing in a way. And I think Dub was kind of feeling the same way I did when I had a good look at myself late in the game, and we weren't looking so good. So Dub had an amazing fishing day this day. So he heads down to the water and he pulls out a burbot on one of his set lines, a decent sized burbot. And if you've ever seen a burbot, they're really weird looking fish. They're kind of look like a cross between a snake and a fish. And but they're totally good eating. And as he's down there, he rebaits the hook with this massive chunk of fish. And he learned in his time out there that the bigger chunk of bait he puts on his hook, he feels that he's going to catch a bigger fish. So he rebaits his hook and puts it in the water. And then beside that set line, he had another hole, and he's doing some jigging, and he ends up catching a large in-canoe through the ice while as he's jigging. And according to the edit, it happened quite soon after he caught that in-canoe. That big set line he set with that big chunk of bait, he pulls up a large pike. So really good fishing day. He had a burbot, an in-canoe, and a pike. And this amount of fish that he caught puts him much further into the game. I don't know about you guys, but when he put that fish on top of his shelter, underneath a few spruce boughs, I thought, oh no, something's gonna get at it. It's day 71, and remember that fish Dub put on his shelter? A marten had got into it and was eating on it. It didn't look like it got too much, so Dub decides to make a bag out of a rain jacket he's not using anymore because it's frozen and dry. He doesn't really need it. And he makes a bag to store his fish and hang in a tree to prevent that marten from getting at it. As you probably all know, we're not allowed to bring a razor with us, I don't think. But if you were allowed to bring one, why would you waste an item on a razor? So Dub's beard is bugging him, and he uses the scissors on his multi-tool to trim his beard. And again, that kind of brought me back to my days, because I don't have very much facial hair, but my mustache was starting to grow and curl into my mouth. So it was like, and when I watch the show back, I'm always going like this, like always, because I was so annoyed by this hair growing into my mouth. And I kind of thought to myself, why didn't I trim my mustache with my multi-tool? Dub decides to reinforce his door a little bit because it was kind of falling apart and drying out, and he could see some light through it. So he reinforces his door. Then he starts talking about how boredom sets in, how you're spending so much time in the shelter, like the dark days of the show, and just there's so little daylight up there. I think they said that at this stage in the game there's only like 4.5 hours of daylight. So you're spending copious amounts of time in your shelter, and that's when it gets hard, being alone in your shelter, in the dark, and with just your headlamp and the light of your fire. And he compares it to solitary confinement, how he feels that that's like the ultimate punishment, is just being locked up in a room by yourself and having to deal with your own thoughts. And yeah, it's hard. And you got to remember, these guys have been out there for over 2 months already, and you're weakening, your body's thin, you're hungry all the time, and you want out of there. It's not fun anymore. There's no warm weather. You can't cruise around and explore and work on projects. It's like you're on your trap line, checking your traps. You're fishing for a little bit, but you can never fish for too long because it's so cold. Or you're in your shelter and you're sleeping. But you get so caught up on your sleep that your body doesn't want to sleep anymore because you can only sleep so much. So yeah, tough times in the game. So next scene, Dub hears a noise outside his shelter and he heads out to investigate. A lot of people watching this probably say, why is he going out there to investigate? Also, he's concerned about something stealing his food. It's day 75, and Dub is trying to pass as much time as he can by just laying in a sleeping bag. And again, you can only sleep for so long. And he gets a notification that there's a med check that day. Now, Dub kind of convinced himself that this is it. I've probably won. My family is going to be waiting for me on the beach, at the river, in the helicopter. They're going to do this med check, and then they're going to tell me I won. So he kind of convinced himself of this. And the med check happened. You know, he got checked out, and off goes the helicopter, and that left him feeling really depressed because he realized that that didn't happen and his family wasn't there. And he had to recover from that, and he was mad at himself for letting himself believe that. So near the end, I heard the helicopter a lot. I could hear it flying around. I don't know what they were doing, or doing a med check and somebody else, or just getting B-roll footage, because they fly around quite a bit just getting footage for the show, all those aerial shots. A lot of it's done with a drone, but they are flying around doing B-roll or getting supplies. I don't know what they were doing, but I heard the helicopter a lot and it messed with my brain. The same thing happened to me. Like it wasn't that late in the game. I guess it was probably, I don't know, in the late 50s, and I had a med check. Or no, I didn't have a med check. It was a media exchange. That's what it was. It was a media exchange. And I gave them my filled cards. They gave me empty cards. And they did a quick interview. Just, you know, how's my food procurement going? All that stuff. I did think that, okay, this is it. This is it. I'm going to win. They're going to tell me it's over. But they left. And I remember being depressed for like a whole day, just miserable, thinking, oh, I thought it was over. So the same thing happened to me. And I'm sure it's happened to all contestants late in the game. It's a tough thing to get through. Folks, as always, thank you so much for sticking around to the end of the video. As you know, last night they showed episode 11, and then right after that, they started the finale. So if you're watching this video on my YouTube channel soon after I posted it, then episode 12 will be up momentarily. Be sure to check that out. We'll see you next time.